Yeah, Jeff here. I'm driving. I'm not looking at all at the screen. I've got this thing sitting on my lap, so I'm not going to be looking at it. I'm driving straight on a long straight road here, highway. Um, I want to just bring up one thing about the ministry and missions topics um, that are, it's interpretation of verses, right? And how we interpret things based on our own cultural values and how we see, how we can interpret verses based on our cultural perspective of what the meaning is behind some concepts that talk about the verses. So I'll give you a practical example. Yesterday, a friend and I were talking about the interpretation of the prodigal son, in which the son left. He asked for money, the inheritance money, up front, rather than waiting until the father had passed away and then you wait for the money to receive the money after its inheritance, right? But the French person saw this as a negative thing in the sense that they left the child left in bad terms, but we don't know that. I said we don't know that because all we know is this the child left. But yeah, but they asked for the money up front. I said yeah, but that's your cultural perspective, right? That's your perspective in a culture in which money is something you don't talk about. And actually, I've been told by that person and the spouses to don't talk about money and not to mention money or social status or anything in my sermons, because that's not appropriate in France. So I had to bring that up again and saying, well, this is the issue, is that because money is a negative thing, because money is something you don't talk about in France, the situation is that when you got to deal with the prodigal son, a French person will see this as a negative thing. It's a negative relationship and stuff, which is probably not. I said if you look at from an American, or I could even say German perspective, I mean, money is just an investment thing, right? So it doesn't matter when you receive the money, right? It doesn't matter. It's just when you choose to spend it, right? When you choose to receive it, when you choose to spend it, it's not because the person had bad terms. The person said, we don't know if the child said, gave the finger, the one way to heaven finger to, to his father. We don't know that. I'm trying to say another way to say that. I'm trying to say it in a nicer way, right? But we don't know that, and I don't see that in the text. I do not see that in the text, that the son is on bad terms with the father and left and just said screw you. I don't see that. If someone sees that, let me know, but I don't see that. But I do see that the child just said with that, because it's risky. It's really risky to interpret this verse as saying that if a child says screw you to the parents, and the parents say, well, I'm going to disinherit you, and all that kind of stuff, because that's a different, and I can see the possibility of doing that if a child is constantly being a real pain. I mean, and telling the parents, I don't want you as parents anymore. The prodigal son is not. I don't see the prodigal son as, I don't see it in that same way. The child did not say, I never want to talk to you again. The child said, I just want my money to go do what I want to go do with it, right? I want it now so I can do things. I don't see the negative relationship. I don't see a damaged relationship there. All I see is that when he was, out of money, then the father felt, compassion and wanted to help him out. So that showed that there was some things. I don't think it's showing that the father had been, was told, I don't want to ever see you again, stuff, and said, well, I'm going to come back and have compassion on you. I don't see that there. What I do see is that the compassion, just because even though the son wanted the money earlier, he didn't want to, he was willing to help out again, okay? But see, this is an interpretation. This is a cultural interpretation, right? This is where you got to be really careful, folks, to inject cultural interpretation into or cultural values into the interpretation of a verse, and to read into it something that is not there. It's a risky thing to do that, because the text doesn't seem to show at all that there is a that there is a need to that there's it doesn't show anything that there is a, that there is, that the sun is having a problem, right? So I'm gonna actually park the car right here. So it's again, I think we need to be really, really careful. And so I just see it as the son wanted investment, and he wanted the medicine money up front, and wanted the money. Now, of course, we got to put this into the kind of the perspective of how the Jews saw things, right? So I think that's really important to see how did the Jews see things here. And park down. So we need to see maybe how the Jewish culture saw that concept. But if I'm talking about modern day culture, how we perceive things and how we interpret things, how we interpret the verses, based on how we perceive money right now, right? Money. I can see money, and I'm not a person that thinks about investment things, right? So I don't really. That's not my big priority, right? So I don't sit there and talk about 401ks and all this stuff and where we're going to transfer money and stuff. That kind of stuff is just not something I'm concerned with on a daily basis, right? I'm not thinking about the percentage things. And just ask me, okay, whatever. But for and French people are not either, because I've grown up with French things, so it's not so much a focus. Whereas Americans are very much into this, right? Americans are really into the money, how much you get out of it, and all. So it's just money, right? It's just you get so much and you do something with it, right? So the Americans, and talking to salaries, no big deal, right? And all that in America, you can do this. Whereas you don't talk about this at all in French culture. So I think it's really, really, really important to separate what is the verse and what the verse is saying, to study into it. And you got to look into the culture perspective of what it was of the culture that the topic is being discussed on, and how that culture perceives money. Then to also look at how the receiving culture, that is the one that is now reading this, how they perceive money, and how the risk of interpreting what the original one was, right? And then I'm talking about here I'm bicultural, right? So I have lived one half of my life in one culture, one half of my life in another culture, and so I see this topic of money differently in each culture, and so I can interpret that verse differently based on which culture I am coming to. And I have no problem, I would have no problem giving a sermon on talking about that, which I would contradict what the French people would say, right? And they'd all say, that's not it. I said, yeah, but you're looking from a different cultural perspective, right? You're just looking from a different cultural perspective. And here, neither one is or nor the other is right. But in the culture, and how now you deal with, how do you interpret the prodigal son, and how do you interpret the relationship that was there, and how do you interpret whether or not what would happen if the terms were the situation was a different, the terms of a relationship were a different situation, in which what if the son had definitely clearly said, screw you, you're not my father anymore, I disown you, I don't want you as my father anymore, right? How would the father interpret that afterwards? Would the father might have given the money, right? But he would probably disown his child afterwards, right? And just not, it's possible. It's very possible. But the text doesn't say that. The text does not say that the child said, screw you. It does not say that he gave the finger to his father. He said, I want my money and up front and leave, So I think it's the risk is reading into a Bible verse, a current cultural view of how money, and this is here it's money, but it can be different things, right? different values about certain topics. So the money's one here, investments, and I've actually done different I made some different video books here on working with different cultures, and I've actually done one on this specific topic is this specific topic of working with the French, working with the Americans, and working with Germans, and so they all have different, very cultural views about the value of money. Right? Completely different perspectives, and in fact, I'm going to go do some videos on those ones. But I want to talk about it here in this work, the ministry and missions, because it's really risky to how you interpret things, and then how you perceive that interpretation, how you preach or talk about that interpretation in a different culture, because you really need to understand that culture might not actually understand and accept it in the same way as yours does, and this is kind of where you get into multiple. This shows that it's really possible to interpret Scripture in different ways. Sometimes we have this notion that a certain verse can only be interpreted one single way, right? I don't believe that, because I'm an expert in language and translation and culture adaptation and all that. I mean, I've spent the past 35-ish years, doing this and talking about it and researching this and putting into place and then selling actually services around this. So I got all the proof to show that you can have multiple interpretations. And I've said you can have multiple interpretations of a single verse, right? And you can do this actually with the Bible, right? You can do that. But it's impossible to have not just multiple translations, but have multiple different interpretations of a given verse based on the culture that is receiving it. So it doesn't mean that there is a single interpretation of every verse. This is tough. Okay, this is a tough topic, because this puts into question the fact that there is a single interpretation of everything. I realize I'm saying this, and I think that this is something that we have to. This is a challenge for theology professors. They have to think about, right? Is it possible to have multiple interpretations? So that's my thoughts on it. It's not a hard and fast rule. I've been thinking about it, and it came up yesterday, and I think I've been thinking about it, but I think it's something that I kind of consider. So that's the thoughts for today in a parked car.